SpaceX launches are modifying the upper atmosphere. It's probably harmless, and so just sort of scientifically neat, but we've never done things on this scale before. So to back up for a second here, I mentioned during our COVID response that if you want to run an experiment involving human subjects in an academic setting, you generally must have the research approved by something like an institutional review board, sometimes called an IRB. And this board will set requirements for the work, especially to protect the participants, which would commonly include things like anyone may opt out of further participation in the experiment at any time. I mentioned this during the COVID response because we were, in effect, running a mass experiment, really several overlapping experiments, on the whole population at once. If you had asked an IRB as part of an academic experiment, can we compel 10-year-olds to wear a mask for 7 hours a day? And no, they aren't allowed to opt out if they still want to attend school. That research proposal would have been shot down immediately as remarkably unethical. But it's totally fine, apparently, if you just want to run the experiment on the whole population at once. And that seems to be the way we go today, mass experiments on everyone at once. So sometimes it seems pretty clear ahead of time that there's going to be negative consequences, like, let's tell a bunch of girls that they're really boys trapped in girls' bodies and that only drugs and surgery will make them happy, for example. Other times it's a little less clear, anyway, the experiment will produce harm. For example, let's give every teenager a smartphone is perhaps in this category of not the harm not being quite as obvious. So that might seem all rather scary, but I share the rest of this stuff now mainly because I find it interesting, although it is sort of an example of a mass experiment. So we've been launching stuff into space for decades now, as you probably know. But SpaceX, all by itself, has dramatically increased the number of launches. So per our world in data right here, in 2010, there were 120 objects launched into space, and in 2023, there were 2,664. Now, objects is not launches, of course, but gives you some idea of the huge ramp up, which you can also see in the graph there. And then, from Gunter's space page here, in 2023, there were 107 orbital launches from the United States. Of that 107, 96 were SpaceX Dragon and 2 were SpaceX Starship. So with a little bit of exaggeration, SpaceX almost has a monopoly on the U.S. launch market now. There were 121 other total launches worldwide, China and then Russia being the other two big sources. So that means about 43% of all launches worldwide were SpaceX launches. So love him or hate him, Musk really is a visionary and an effective force here. So we're punching rockets through the upper atmosphere like never before, and that does seem to be having an effect. So the rest of this video here is prompted by some reporting from Space Weather, which is my favorite, space weather website. So if you check them out, I do recommend them, spaceweather.com. They have noticed two things. So the first here is holes in the ionosphere. So our launches are punching holes in the ionosphere. The video, which you can go find there, this clip, is actually from a Firefly Aerospace launch on July 3rd. The glowing red you see behind the rocket is actually the ionospheric hole. So the ionosphere is an ionized part of the upper atmosphere, approximately 30 to 600 miles up, ionized by the impact of solar radiation that knocks off electrons. It's practically important because the ionosphere is how radio waves are able to propagate over the horizon. So before satellite communication, of course, this was very important for vessels at sea and aircraft and such, and HF communications are still a thing. Today, ham radio operators, which is one group that is still very keen to send radio waves over the horizon, might notice they can't pick up stations from as far away. The water and carbon dioxide being spit out the back of the rocket significantly reduces ionization where the rocket goes through, and all those electrons suddenly hopping up and down in energy level are what produces the red light. The holes, though, do go away when the sun comes up and re-ionizes the atmosphere. So, this is all harmless then? All undone when the sun rises again? Probably, but you just never know. We've never done it on this scale before. And then the second thing they noticed, which is more photographically appealing, is Noctalucent clouds. So these are Noctalucent clouds, and there seems to have been an increase lately in the number of Noctalucent clouds. Now, as far as I know, I've never personally seen one, but they look something like this. This is a real photo here. These clouds, they're clouds, so they're composed of ice crystals scattering the remnant light, and they're generally visible just after sunset. They're very high, up in the mesosphere, so 250,000 to 275,000 feet up there, so way above your commercial airline flight, which might be 40,000 feet. Most of the clouds are below you, but these would still be way above you. They are normally confined to the Arctic Circle, and there are generally fewer of them during the solar maximum because ultraviolet light from the sun breaks up the water molecules, or breaks the water molecules up there apart, and so it sort of destroys the clouds. But lately, despite the fact that we are in a solar maximum right now, remember the mega aurora display a while back, these clouds have been seen at lower altitudes in Europe. So what's going on? Well, we're not sure, but it would appear that something is adding water vapor to the mesosphere, which is causing the creation of more of these clouds, sort of counteracting the effect of the solar maximum. So what could put water vapor in the mesosphere? Well, you got basically two choices there: volcanic eruptions and rocket launches, which are certainly doing it. So granted, this is probably harmless. I'm not aware of any major effect these clouds have on the Earth besides looking pretty, but this is just something we've never done at scale before. It is at least pretty neat.